And
Hello,
we are
Senior
live.
Nation. Hi, Jose. How you doing today?
Hello, Justin. Wonderful day. I'm so excited.
Uh,
A
you
lot
know,
of things
we
to talk about.
we have been working toward this quite a bit for the past little while. For those of you who are, you may know us from our biweekly Twitter Spaces, Crypto Open Mic. Jose and I are co-hosts of those on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we had this idea of doing something kind of bigger and better that extends this whole thing into a virtual trade show with panel discussions. And today we have some pretty exciting guests, don't we, Jose?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the spaces have been great, but it's time to put the face
Yes,
and keep
absolutely.
leveling up.
Yes, I'm sure at least people are happy to see Jose. I'm old at this point, but I'm still glad to see y'all. Thank you for tuning in. We have lots of great projects joining, including Origin Protocol, Bancor, Yesports, Venus Protocol, Yield App, Tron DAO, StealthX, uh, BTC Incorporated is joining us, Osmosis Labs, and of course the whole Cosmos panel. Cosmos is a project that I've always been very interested in ever since I interviewed Osmosis last year. So we have Osmosis joining us with Sonny Aggarwal. He's a core dev for Cosmos overall. We've got Quasar Finance, Somalia Protocol, and Axelar. And of course, we have in just a couple of minutes Anthony Scaramucci being interviewed by our own Luke Jacoby. So that should be very interesting.
Yes, I'm excited for that too.
What
Should
are you looking
we
forward to
review
today?
the main panels?
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead and tell us about the panels,
Well,
Jose.
after the fire chat, will be hosting decentralization and empowering the market,
Mm-hmm.
then securing projects and protecting investors. And afterwards, we will have the Cosmos panel with mesh security versus ICS.
Mm-hmm.
Then we will have some closing remarks and ready to go.
Fantastic. It's going to be a great show, guys. It's going to run about 2.5 hours, and we're very excited. I mean, not only for this opportunity to put faces to voices, if you've been, joining us on Twitter Spaces, and I hope you have. We really had some great guests, but to be able to expand some of that work we're doing. Benzinga is constantly trying to reach and speak to the projects and the speakers that people most want to hear from, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Yes, please smash the like. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe. We couldn't do it without your support, Zinger Nation. You are your positive participation in this overall is an essential part of our decentralized trade show. So please do come on and tell your friends about it. Post on Twitter and like and subscribe.
Yeah, and also comment because we are seeing all the comments. And if you have questions for the speakers, please drop it on the YouTube chat, and we will bring the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Should
Yeah,
we bring Luke?
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring Luke on. Luke is our chief operating officer. And how are you doing today, Luke?
Doing well. I'm excited to dive in. There's a lot going on in the world right now, of course, both inside crypto and traditional finance and politics, etc. So eager to get in here, have some of these important discussions.
Yeah, and it's going to be an exciting interview. I'm really interested in hear what Anthony has to say. And I think, do we have Anthony on? I think we do. So why don't we're going to go ahead and bring Anthony on, and Jose and I will go ahead and jump off. Well, thank you very much, and we'll hand it over to you, Luke.
All righty. I appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen. So I am about to be joined by Anthony Scaramucci, founder, managing partner of SkyBridge Capital. He's been a leading thinker in the crypto world for a number of years now. We actually got to talk to Anthony in New York at Benzinga's Future of Crypto conference just about a week after the FTX collapse, and that was an important week, and a lot has happened since then. One of the reasons why I really like hearing from Anthony and hearing Anthony's take on the world is that he's been involved in traditional asset management outside of crypto for a number of years, and in a very significant way, and as a very significant player. He's seen his fair share of ups and downs. So while we are living in this reality that is not the straight up bull market that we got lucky with for a couple of years, I think it's especially important to hear from Anthony and get his perspective on the world. Anthony, how are you doing?
Luke, good to be here. That was a fun event. You left out Kevin O'Leary. He also joined me at your event here in New York, which was fun. And
yes,
and obviously you've probably heard the news. Sam Bankman-Fried is now being accused of moving $40 million of cryptocurrency assets to some Chinese governmental officials. So the story gets worse for him, unfortunately. But we move on, and there's great resiliency in the space this year. SkyBridge is having a very good quarter. I mean, we'll have to see what happens over the course of the year. But I think most of the bad news is behind us. I'm not saying we're entering the spring yet, but it does feel like lots of leverage out of the system, lots of bad news out of the system. But, if you're not worried about the U.S. government's take on crypto, I think you should be. The U.S. government has decided that without any legislation and any real clarity related to rules, they've decided that they want to shut certain things down related to crypto. They want to unbank elements of crypto, or at least the Fed seems to be putting pressure on people to do that. For right now, it's having the reverse effect. I think people are realizing, well, if they're doing that, probably need to own more of this, because who the hell knows what's coming down the pike. But I don't like it, frankly. I think that in the country that I grew up in, we had Congress legislate and dictate what the rules would be, and then you had administrators enforce those rules. Now they're making a decision that they're not going to tell you what the rules are, and then they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. So I'm worried about that, frankly. Of all the things out there to be worried about, from a FUD perspective, I think the U.S. government has got to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you gave us a lot to go off of. You mentioned FTX, regulation, asset prices. I want to dig in on FTX since you mentioned that at the top. There was a few-week period where Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX was a household name. When the fund blew up and everything came to light, my mom, I've been at Benzinga for 10 years. My mom has no idea what I do, even though I've tried to explain it. But she was even calling me and asking me, hey, what is this FTX thing? Mm-hmm. Since then, we've been in the dark a little bit more. I'm curious, from your perspective, more your insider view, your more developed understanding of how this process works, what's been going on, what has your reality been like? Any takeaways you can share with us?
Well, listen, I mean, it was abject fraud. Kevin O'Leary and I differ there. Okay, he's given Sam the benefit of the doubt, but my attitude is, if the window's open and you hear clippity clop outside, it's a horse, it's not a zebra. The obvious is the obvious. You have 3 of his cohorts in his internal circle have pled guilty to fraud, and the evidence is overwhelming. You're also listening to the new CEO, Ray from FTX, explained that this was just classic embezzlement and a mishandling of funds. And so we can go over that history again. They did a very good job of hiding it. They had certain mechanisms in place related to their software so that their accounting firms and the account holders really couldn't see it. And it's upsetting to me because I trusted Sam, and that was obviously a real betrayal. But here's the thing. Unfortunately, in new technologies, as we adapt and adopt new technologies to our marketplace, you do find people that do fraudulent things. You can take it all the way back to the 1890s and the railroads. Jay Gould was printing out stock certificates on companies that didn't even exist. As an example, in the 1920s, when the Senate was holding hearings, they were talking about the banksters, and they were talking about all the illicit activity that was happening at the nation's banks as we were crippled in a banking crisis. And you need regulation. The question before everybody right now is, what is the use case for the blockchain, and is that use case deployable across the marketplace? I think the resounding answer to that is yes. And put simply, blockchain technology is a wonderful delayering mechanism for the society. It can cut out intermediaries. It can create trust through this sort of trustless decentralization. And so you don't have to worry about one significant centralized entity. All of these things make for cheaper economic savings, which lead to greater innovation. And I'll just point this out, and you probably know this, but I think it's worth repeating. The economic ministry of El Salvador, I'm about to take a trip down there to see President Bukele, but when they came here in September of last year, they sat here in this office and explained to me that a wallet-to-wallet transfer between expatriates of El Salvador and their families in El Salvador, if they can bypass MoneyGram or they can bypass Western Union, they'll save about $400 million a year. And so if you just extrapolate that across nations and people, you can see the overwhelming benefits of this stuff. And so I think the U.S. is making a mistake. I think, and I've said this, I got in trouble with Donald Trump for this. When you're putting up walls represent weakness and walls represent insecurity. Okay. If you look at the Berlin Wall as an example, they were trying to defend East Berlin by not letting their citizens migrate to West Berlin or to seek freedom in the West. It doesn't work. You're better off building a better mousetrap. You're better off building a better system. So the United States has decided that this is, even though it's still nascent, very small, it's under $2 trillion, 1.1 to $1.2 trillion. It's a very small niche market still. It's potentially threatening to them. It's potentially threatening to the organism of the money center banks and the Federal Reserve and the central banking system. And so they want to snuff it out now. They could have been successful at that maybe 5 or 10 years ago. They will not be successful at that now. This stuff will migrate off the shore of the United States, and it'll lead to some huge successful outcomes for other countries, but not the U.S.
And so let me ask you this. And in preparation for our chat today, I was listening back to some comments you made at SALT about a year ago, and I give you a lot of credit. You're talking about Sam Bankman-Fried at that time, and you said he's a capitalist, so he's no Mother Teresa, or I don't expect him to be Mother Teresa or something along those lines, which we were giving you a lot of credit for in the office. But given the regulatory environment and world that we live in right now, how do you think about due diligence as an investor? I mean, there's not only risk in the company, there's systemic risk in the market, but you also have the risk from the U.S. government. So
I'll just say this quickly. I thought he was the Mark Zuckerberg of crypto. I didn't think he was the Bernie Madoff of crypto. Mm-hmm. We did do the due diligence, but alongside of 25 other venture capitalists, we got it wrong. It's not the first time I got something wrong, and it won't be the last time. But I will say this, I am doing on-site visits now to every project, every single thing that I'm investing in. And unfortunately, we have to assume these people are guilty until we prove them innocent. And I think that was a mistake that a lot of us made with Sam. We met his family members and met him, and maybe we took too big of a leap of faith on him, the family he grew up in, and what we thought he was about. And I have to own that for the rest of my life, but I don't mind owning it. I think it's very important for people to be accountable. The more accountability that you have, the less likely you'll make those mistakes in the future. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that this is a great quarter for the fund. All right,
Yeah.
It's in the backdrop of a lot going on amid interest rates, banking collapse, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about your view on the market or what led to fund outperformance, et cetera.
Well, I've got a third of my business in the crypto space. Obviously, that went up a lot the first quarter. Mm-hmm. It's very sticky. They're punishing it regulatorily, and there's lots of uncertainty in the marketplace. But I predict that we're going to have a big year for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a few of these other securities, and we're long those securities. And while the market was up in the beginning of the year, it's trading flattish now, we're having a pretty big year.
Awesome. And either within crypto, outside of crypto, the market as a whole, asset classes that are especially interesting to you right now?
Well, I would just tell everybody that this is a Fed-centric market, as it has been for the last 15 years. And so until you get a meaningful pivot from the Fed, There's no green lights in the market. There are speed bumps ahead for the market. There are certainly, due to the volatility, there'll be speed bumps ahead in crypto. But I like crypto here. I think crypto has proven very resilient with all the uncertainty around. But you got to wait for the Fed to pivot, Luke, before you see any real great market activity on the bull side.
Yeah, it's like our business is talking to retail investors, and we all think we can fight the Fed, and we get proven wrong time and time again. It's a lesson all of us retail investors have to learn.
Well, it's good to be here with you, man. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Anthony.
All right. Be well, guys.
All right. Take care. All right. How about that? I think we were able to hit all the hot topics. We got the FTX situation in there. We got the state of the market in there. We got the regulation in there. Talked about asset classes we're looking at. Justin, J-Rod.
Love the symbolism of the wall, and there's no wall crypto can break. So let's see how it evolves.
It's good to hear from Anthony. He did a great job with the Future Crypto Show in New York, of course. So great job, Luke. Good to hear his comments, because he has a realistic and yet kind of optimistic view on the future. And, as per some of the comments that he has made recently, it would be good to see government organizations, maybe other than the SEC, do something other than just kind of, punish Coinbase and try and wipe out crypto. It's, it'll be like some positive action, some positive participation would be really great to see.
100%. Like the comment he made about El Salvador, right? And the amount of money that some of these legacy or some like these financial infrastructure plays like a MoneyGram are making, and how that disappears over time. I mean, it's interesting stuff, and I really appreciate the way Anthony looks at the world.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to conduct that interview, Luke. Thank you so much for joining us. Luke will be coming back at the end for closing comments, and thanks for doing that, Luke.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
All right, take care.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
All right, interview. Extreme 15 minutes. Super interesting.
It was really good, and we really appreciate Anthony taking the time to speak with us today. It is good to hear from people who have kind of a foot both in traditional investing and Web3. And now go ahead.
Well, we understand that crypto is helping solve the lives of so many people around the world. And one of the most important things is decentralization, right? We all know that decentralization is something that empowers humanity. So with that being said, let's proceed for our next panel, that it's decentralization and how it empowers the market.
Decentralization empowering the market. That's true. We're going to go ahead and bring on all of our speakers. We've got Josh, and let's scroll down.
Let's review the list before we start, right?
So, let me go ahead and give a list of the people that we are looking at right now. We've got Josh Fraser, co-founder of Origin Protocol. How you doing, Josh?
Welcome.
Doing great. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. We have Joshua Schone, who is integration analyst from Bancor.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. We've got Seb Quinn, who is the founder of Yesports. Hi, Seb. How are you?
Yeah, good, Justin. Delighted to be here with everyone.
Glad you could make it. We've got Brad Harrison, DeFi Evangelist from Venus Protocol.
Not here yet.
Oh, not here yet. Okay, my bad. And we've got Lucas Keeley, CIO of Yield App.
Hi, Justin and everyone. Good to see you all again.
Hello.
Good to see you. Are we having from Bancor? Are we having camera problems right now, Josh, or what's going on?
I'm a little small for some reason. Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Can't believe you missed that live.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today, guys. I'm thrilled to be doing the show. I'm thrilled you all could make it. And this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because honestly, we didn't hear a lot about decentralization during the bull market. I noticed that our adherence to it became, waned a bit during the waned a bit during the actual bull market. Like people cared less when it's so easy to hype around these centralized projects and these centralized figures who end up developing a cult-like following in some ways. Sam Bankman-Fried being one example, but certainly not the only one. You know, is this crypto winter kind of returning us to our roots, Lucas? Do you think that, is this pushing people back toward decentralization as one of the key virtues, the key tenets of crypto?
I really think so. I think, I've always said that decentralization, especially in crypto, is like Napster on steroids. I think I said that the first time we spoke. Right. And, we see what Napster did to the world when we started to have like sort of peer-to-peer sharing of files, etc. And the industry it blossomed and the industry it destroyed. Mm-hmm. And when we look at decentralized finance, and I could go into some of the issues that Anthony talked about in quite some detail as well when it comes to sort of migrant workers and modern slavery and the benefits of being able to pay those migrant workers in their home countries so they're not having to use money services and losing 20-30% of their capital. I mean, essentially, decentralized finance allows the world to be banked when they couldn't be banked otherwise. And I think it really is a game changer for more people in developing worlds and in the developing countries than it is for people in, who are just used to the traditional finance. Banks go to the bank, you bank, oh, by the way, your bank's not here today, but the Fed's going to step in for you. I think what we see with decentralized finance is an honest attempt at doing finance properly. And I think, it arrived. Well, if we look at the way BTC or Bitcoin arrived, because of the failure of the traditional financial services system, and obviously we found a new way, and then we've evolved that new way, and the technology that's come with that has been amazing because people see the benefits of Web3, and in a trusted network, you need trustless payments, and then that's where we're at. So I do think it's a big game changer.
Seb, the big fear though is, are we, have we in our original? Sometimes I feel like our technology is slightly ahead of the technology is ahead of the philosophy. We have the ability to do these things. We haven't thought through all of the applications, in other words, or all the implications. So in the case of DeFi, in the case of trying to extend financial services to the underbanked and the unbanked, which is a very serious issue. There are billions of people worldwide there that are unbanked or underbanked. There's even a significant number in the United States, for that matter, but across the globe, it's a huge number. So there's a huge amount of good that can be done. But are we running into the trap of also reproducing some of the same problems that exist in traditional finance, but without the same kind of guardrails? What are your thoughts on that?
An interesting question. I mean, I think we approach it from, a very practical point of view, what we try and build. And what we've built is informed by some of the history we've had in crypto. So if you'll indulge, I'll take a very quick sec to run through sort of what got us into this and then segue to why DeFi. In 2017, one of the investments we made was into a Venezuelan centralized crypto exchange. We saw the promise of banking the unbanked. You saw what the core technology of Bitcoin and Ethereum could do, and the speed of transactions and security and everything that we all know about that. And then we saw significant disruption in Venezuela at the time, politically, and we thought, wow, fantastic! This idea that we had presented in this business as a centralized exchange about how we could bank the unbanked would solve a lot of problems. What we realized, what ended up happening is that, sadly for, the population and especially the workforce we had in that business, that they actually all fled, and that business had to shut because there wasn't actually people able to be, in the office, connecting the, facilitating the transactions and allowing that centralized exchange to, do what it promised to do, which was, allow Venezuelans to have a, self-sovereign source of wealth outside of, a crippling, against the backdrop of their crippling kind of economy. And so, we saw the promise of what decentralized could hold through that experience, but you see that there are still very real problems. There's very practical problems in actually, making sure that the people whom are unbanked in this instance actually still have access to it. And, we're not even talking about access to banks, we're talking about access to, crypto. And then, there are still significant impediments to allowing, onboarding those users, or allowing, anyone in the world to still purchase that. And so, fast forward 3 or 4 years, you've seen better, solutions to that problem, but it's still not perfect, right? It's still very difficult for, a lot of, developing world in turmoil, to still get access to decentralized, these decentralized assets. And so, I guess we look at it from the point of view that, yes, the technology actually still holds that, tremendous amount of promise. But, when it comes to the practicality of how you get, the onboarding and the local licensing requirements, you see in countries like Indonesia, where we have a presence that, it's still very difficult. You still have regulatory impediments that would, if not there, would have, you would have the benefit of, of that country, or those users in that country being able to access, these products. And so it is very much kind of, you feel the regulatory point, the regulator isn't actually there necessarily supporting the good of the users or the good of the populace in terms of, getting self-sovereignty of world and having, differentiated asset classes and easy access to, those asset classes. And so, we see the core power of what, decentralized assets could provide. And you still see, as you said, these impediments that continue to exist, and, regulators not understanding, the full power of what it can do, or perhaps, and then taking a differing view of that for who it benefits. But certainly the technology is there to be able to, as Lucas said, bank the unbanked. The technology is there to allow for speedy remittance. The technology is there to allow on-chain contracts to exist in the example of migrant workers. You not only have a situation where you can, pull out the remittance agencies, but you can also pull out, the intermediaries that would, be dealing with the identity and dealing with the contracting relationship there as well. There is a lot that technology can deliver.
But to add to that, Sebastian, I think it goes worse than that. In that, if you're a Bangladeshi migrant worker going to work in a bottling plant in Bahrain, you get your contract in Bangladesh, and then you get to Bahrain and your contract's ripped up. You're given a new contract, saddled with a load of debt. Your passport's taken from you, and you're stuck in a place where your salary's halved, and you've got no way of getting your money out. And I think if you're the company that's employing that migrant worker through an intermediary, as you say, you have no idea the contract that your workers are working under. And I think this is one of the most powerful things that blockchain allows us to do, is to put a stop to that practice. It's not about just the payment system. It's about immutability of contract. And I think it makes such a big difference to the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world. And it allows us as an industry to take control of something that governments have failed to address for decades.
They make an interesting point, Josh, to take it over to Origin. I know that Origin, I believe you've been, you have released, or you're about to release maybe a governance token or something like that. Are you moving? Is Origin making conscious moves towards greater decentralization? That seems to be a core tenet of Origin as well, which of course it is in much of the blockchain world, but some people do more about it than other projects. I've talked to many projects that it's on the roadmap to become a DAO, and then it stays on the roadmap. But what's Origin doing about it right now? What's your attitude about the value of decentralization?
I think it's really important, and people are starting to understand the importance of being able to see everything on chain. People are sick and tired of trust us, funds are safe, finance, right? And that's what DeFi is here to save us from that. So you don't have to wonder, are we doing anything shitty with my money? at Origin, right? We're on Origin Dollar. We have this yield-bearing stablecoin. If you want to see if your money's there, you can just look in the Block Explorer, and you can see. You can see that it's 100% backed. You can see all the funds are there. You see exactly where they're being deployed. You can understand where that yield is coming from. There's no question of what's happening and how it's working. And so that's really important to us, is that transparency, and it should be important to users as well. And I think users are starting to understand why it matters. And you look at the data after FTX, there was this huge shift of funds flowing off of centralized exchanges and onto, self-custodied wallets. And that was a real, we can look at the data, we can see those outflows. And so, I think the, scammers like Sam Bankman-Fried and the U.S. government have done more for decentralization than many of us in the space of pushing people to actually stay true to kind of these core concepts of decentralization. For us, the journey has been, we started like a lot of projects of sort of progressive decentralization. When we first deployed Origin Dollar, we did it from a single EOA wallet from a developer, right? And then quickly transitioned that to a multi-sig wallet. Then from there, we said, okay, we still need the ability to upgrade things, but let's put a time lock in front of that, so that if we were to do something malicious or anything, people have time to see that's coming and get their funds out. And then finally, the last step for us was actually transitioning all the way to our governance token, which is OGV, and we. Now the Origin Dollar is 100% governed by that token, and token holders are ultimately the ones responsible for approving any upgrades to the contracts or any changes. And so we're really proud of that, and it's really important for us that this is something that's actually owned and controlled by the people whose funds are at stake. And so we're really proud of that. We didn't get there overnight. It took us a while to get to that point. But now we're at that point where token holders are really the ones governing the protocol.
It's interesting. Like, I think that two offshoots to all the innovation around crypto have been, in my opinion, I doubt I'm the only person to say it, but I've been NFTs as sort of a separate subset. Of course, they're going to have their own useful life, and then DAOs themselves, because in a sense, we have people building. You're building communities, you're building societies. It causes an examination of what a democracy looks like, for that matter. Of course, here in the U.S., we are technically a republic, not a direct democracy. So lots of questions when you look into DAO governance, that it's going to be a fascinating social experiment, if nothing else. Hopefully, go ahead.
Yeah, I think participating in DAO governance, you see why the U.S. focused on being a republic instead. A direct democracy, like you suffer from fact that people don't have enough information to be making these decisions and don't have the time to put in to be making, voting on every single thing. And that's, kind of the wisdom behind the US system of saying, hey, why don't you actually elect people who can actually go and become experts, and we trust them to be sort of guardians of the protocol. And we're seeing that in DeFi, where people are now, the focus has really shifted to, hey, why don't you delegate your votes to someone you trust, and then they can be doing that oversight instead of doing it directly, because it's just too much of an ask for the average person to be going through and reviewing Solidity code to try and understand exactly what's going on. That doesn't mean it's not work. Like, what's important is that you can do that if you want to, right? If you are motivated, you do have an incentive to get in there and pay attention and be a part of it. That's open, right? It's that permissionless that really makes DeFi really unique and really powerful.
Are we in a sense then creating a new class of Web3 politician, perhaps? I mean, I know that to a degree. Isn't that kind of funny, Jose? We could have a virtual Lindsey Graham to balance out the horrible real Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
Happy
Yeah, totally. And
node operators have already been in that position to some degree, right? They have to lobby for support, and it, particularly because I'm so interested in GameFi. I'm a game dev myself. Not that I actually code, but I'm on a dev team for an MMO. I know that like nothing, no creative piece, no work of art gets created by committee. So I wonder how like DAO governance would tie in specifically with things that are creative endeavors like GameFi. I definitely want to take this over to Bancor as well. But does anybody have any quick comments on that or experiences with that?
I think those are the words of the great Dave Cutler from Microsoft, that nothing good has ever come from a committee, Justin. And it's how we got Windows NT. There's a great book called Showstopper, right? It's about the development of Windows NT and the demise of OS2 under the IBM banner, and what Dave and Bill did to destroy that. And one of the comments by Dave was, nothing good ever came from a committee. Take a look at Unix.
Yeah.
And I think you just...
It's true. I mean, it's like also if you look at how the communities bicker in gaming. I mean, it's really the only the only audience I've dealt with that is more cantankerous than the blockchain audience. Except all you guys loving. I love you guys. People get passionate and then spend weeks arguing about the name of a mineral in game. Like literally that happened at one point, an almost earth-shattering level of conflict. So like applying, you're right, applying direct voting to like a creative endeavor. I'm really interested in seeing how that will work out. But Joshua from Bancor, you could be our enigmatic character here. I'm sorry about the camera problems.
It's all right.
But Bancor obviously has already made quite a name for itself in a decentralized way by being an exchange for being a decentralized, playing this decentralized role to convert crypto into exchange crypto. Are you feeling particularly prescient after this year? Like you could have like you knew that decentralization was central from your inception. So how are you feeling about the events of the past year or so, where so many spectacular and colorful failures have happened around centralized leaders and centralized projects who then allegedly misused money?
Well, over the last year, it's been really fascinating watching all of the different ways in which these companies have failed. You've got places like Terra Luna and FTX, and like the core of it is kind of fraud, but the actual mechanism which causes them to fail, it's hugely varied. So it's been really fascinating. Bancor has been around since 2017 as a decentralized exchange, so we're pretty insulated from that kind of thing. But in terms of governance, there are so many places. Game developers years ago, speaking of game development, they kind of figured out that they could make a game just barely, just functional enough and make it look promising. And then they could put it into early access, and people would give them lots and lots of money, and then they'd kind of run off with it. And that's really what happened a lot in the last crypto bull market. People made like these promises about decentralization or DAO governance or future token models. And they made something that was just functional enough that you could give it money, and then it kind of never went anywhere. So we're always in this process of post bull market clarity, in which we kind of sit back and we remember, it's like, oh, that's what we're here for. We're not here for like 81,000% APR, token printing, like we're role playing as the Fed. We're here to make useful products. Scaramucci mentioned this $400 million number in terms of remittances. If the only thing that this whole crypto experience ever accomplishes is just removing that point of friction, that would still be a massive accomplishment globally. In America, in first world countries, in Europe, we're also used to hearing things in tunes of not billions, but hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars. It's like $400 million in fees. That's more than the budget for some island nation's entire government. Like that is so important. It is so significant. Just removing that one area of friction to empower these places to get out from under the Fed or under inflationary monetary systems.
Mm-hmm. You know, and what do you think of this latest move by the lovable and charming Gary Gensler, who's run like 7 marathons, by the way? Did you know that? I feel like every time I bring up Gary Gensler, I'm going to give you a positive fun fact about Gary Gensler. He did a 50-mile marathon too, something I think I would literally die if I tried to do. So
well, he's got to have the good cardio to keep cranking the money printer. Right, like he's gotta be in shape to keep turning the dial.
You know, it probably is hand crank. I like to think of it that way. It may not be true, but I like to imagine him just, you know, in the office late at night, just turning the wheel to just keep cranking out more money. You know, is he? It feels a little bit like kicking an industry when it's down to go after Coinbase, which has been trying for like a year to work peaceably with them. Is this, as Ryan had suggested in comments earlier, you know, just is he declaring war on crypto? Is this about extending the SEC's influence, do you think, or why exactly is he doing this now? And do we think that decentralization will help insulate these kind of moves from the SEC?
The decentralization will absolutely help insulate it. Keeping things decentralized it goes a long way in making sure that you pass the Howey test, or rather fail it. Don't qualify for all 4 aspects of it. But Gary Gensler, I genuinely don't know what he thinks of crypto at all. Because when he talks about it, it seems so eclectic, borderline schizophrenic sometimes. It's like, how many times do the guys at Coinbase have to like beg the government for regulatory clarity before they all of a sudden get served with papers? Like that just seems so ridiculous. On a global level, what it really looks like is that the United States wishes to establish dominance, regulatory dominance over the entire planet in terms of crypto. And it looks like they're losing that fight slowly, going down kicking and screaming, but it looks like it's going to be a lost fight in the long term. Because when you try and regulate TikTok next block, you're not regulating Bitcoin. It's not going to happen. China can declare it illegal for the 50th time. The United States can ban mining rig. It's not going to happen. It's just
I think Lucas wants to add something.
Well, yeah, I just think that the first thing I think is important to remember is that the SEC does serve a legitimate purpose in financial markets. It is there to protect consumers. It is there to protect nefarious activity. And I don't think after the last year, we can honestly say that crypto comes out with the crypto industry has come out shining as a pallbearer for honesty and integrity. I think there is obviously a lot of ammunition that the SEC has now gotten thanks to Sam and Do Kwon, et cetera, where they say, well, okay, if you can have fraud at this level or this scale, then we obviously need to do something. And I think that's a positive thing. I think the problem with Coinbase is that they've tried to do everything right and seen their competitors do whatever they wanted. And it creates a very unfair playing field to the only kind of US listed, try to be the good guy, regulated exchange. And everyone else can say, well, okay, so we're still playing the Wild West. So I do think that the SEC has treated Coinbase unfairly relative to everyone else. But it goes to say that if you choose to be regulated, then the regulator has a beef in your fight. Whereas if you choose to avoid all regulation, like some others, then the regulator is just left chasing shadows. And I'm not sure we want that either. I think the balance has to come. And I think that on the one hand, you know, Gensler used to teach Bitcoin and crypto markets at MIT, right? He's not stupid. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
The problem is he's just not doing the right thing. But if the US wants to own this space, it should empower Coinbase and then give it the ability to dominate. You know, it's what we did in the internet years in the 90s, right? The US became the dominant player because they were the ones that were creating the open market. It's the biggest problem, I think, in in the US at the time was exporting encryption through SSL, right? We were like, okay, we're not going to let anyone else have Netscape with 128-bit SSL. Well, that's stupid, and that didn't work out very long, right? So I think at the end of the day, decentralized finance destroys a lot of the narrative around crypto, because ultimately we can code the contracts to basically build the regulatory guardrails that matter, and essentially making those regulators redundant. So I think that's the positive side of that.
The thing that makes the SEC's actions to me so confusing over like the last 2 years is they say that they're doing this in the name of consumer protection, stopping people from fraud, but it looks like they have just completely failed in that regard. When you look at centralized markets, particularly the GameStop stock debacle, like GameStop and all of the absolute insanity around that stock and shorting, and the going after Redditors for buying calls and put, like, they're attacking the wrong people all the time. It doesn't look like they're interested in protecting, retail. It looks like they're coming after them explicitly, and that's what makes the whole Coinbase SEC issues that much more confusing. Is they're saying, I'm doing this to protect you, meanwhile they're just letting Robinhood and Citadel do whatever they want.
Yeah, we're comfortable with having 3 or 5 banks, I forget which it is, running everything in the U.S. in traditional finance. Why are they getting all fussy about monopolies? Crypto?
We'll give SVB $30 billion or whatever it is, but every year a bank embezzles or gets bailed out for more money than FTX had in total deposits. Like,
that's true.
But don't forget, right, under the Troubled Asset Relief Program, the US government actually made money from that. It wasn't like, oh, we bought some equity and lost and taxpayers lost out. It was a profitable program, and only slightly profitable, but still profitable. So, I think that, often taxpayers go, why are we bailing out the banks? Well, when we chose not to bail out the banks, which was Lehman, that followed, which would have been, it was American Insurance, AIA, it was Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, all these mergers, etc., that took place. I mean, can you imagine the catastrophe if Bank of America had gone down? If Goldman Sachs became a deposit-taking institution, I mean, the ramifications of not bailing out Lehman were huge. And I think the lessons learned from that was, okay, we need to bail out. TARP actually worked. We made money as a government, and we stabilized the system. I think it's very easy for us to sit there and go, oh, we bailed out all these banks. But when they unwound it, they still made money. So it wasn't a bad trade.
Well, they're not bailing out all the banks, though. They're bailing out the biggest banks.
Right.
Community banks aren't getting these bailouts. They aren't getting the protection.
But they aren't systemically. They don't systemically matter, do they?
They do, because if you don't bail out the small banks, large depositors stop using them, and we get this mass centralization. We get this government picking winners and losers, where all the community banks and their depositors, they have to flee to Silicon Valley. It doesn't matter that Silicon Valley is mismanaging the funds, because that's the only place that historically the government is going to bail you out if it goes under. It doesn't matter that go on.
Great point. Yeah, you are making a great point, and it's true. I mean, honestly, the inflation that we're experiencing in the U.S. right now is the story of consolidation and monopolies or near monopolies by a few companies controlling an industry and then controlling the prices. I mean, this is the result of what we're dealing with, and it's hard to imagine that in these regulations that they necessarily have the consumer at heart. But let me take a question over to Seb. I like to here you could solve everything for us, Seb. I like gathering the smartest people I can get to speak to me, to explain things to me. That's part of why I enjoy this job. Like and subscribe, everyone. But what I've been wondering, Seb, is, like, since there is so much interest in distributed governance or DAOs, why is it that when everything really hits the fan, so to speak, we still turn to traditional finance? Why is it that what happened? Like, what would happen if, in some greater sense, these governing bodies, these distributed governing bodies, would intersect to self-regulate, but also like self-maintain on some level. It seems like we could have a global distributed system, more like the original Bitcoin white paper was calling for. If we would, is it a lack of willingness to work together? Are we too early on in terms of governance? Do you think that if there's any possibility of it going in that direction, or am I being hopelessly optimistic?
I think the characterization is not so much a fleeing to traditional finance. I think, you know, maybe that was what happened in 2017 when, you know, there was a lot of stress around, could you trust Tether? Could you trust, you know, the nascent stable coins that existed at that time? The very few. I think we've seen now, you know, even today with you know, with the noise around Binance, that, you know, people are pulling their stable coins off centralized exchanges and they're keeping them, you know, they're keeping them in self-sovereign custody. They're not rushing and, you know, flipping it into or en masse, you know, trading it and putting it back into the, you know, Bank of America account and earning 5%. You know, we're seeing this intervening flight to safety within the industry that hasn't, you know, historically, you know, been as real or as prevalent. And so, you know, that gives quite a lot of, you know, there's a lot of hopefulness there. And it's not just stables, it's also, you know, the flight back to Ethereum and to Bitcoin. It's not just to Bitcoin like it was in, you know, in 2017 and has historically been, you know, since inception, you know, a decade or so ago. And so you are already seeing, yes, there is this comfort within the industry that there are aspects of it that we have placed a lot more trust in. And those are the trustless part, you know, the more and more of these sort of trustless parts of it. You know, what we are also recognizing, which is how we started the conversation, that, you know, decentralization is very different in, you know, it means something very different across all of the asset classes that exist. It means something different across all of the protocol, you know, at the protocol levels that exist, you know. And so you're seeing not just this sort of allocation, you know, if we are, you know, flight to safety and a flight to decentralization, we're seeing this, you know, that happening not just at the asset class, but we're seeing it at the protocol class. So if you look at, you know, the tables, you can start to see like the top 20 or top 30, you know, protocols that exist are starting to consolidate. You're seeing people flee out of, you know, you know, protocols that perhaps, I don't want to, you know, not to name names, but ones that, you know, were, you know, perhaps folks like Scaramucci have been heavily involved in, perhaps not so heavily involved in now.
So have a lot of people been. I mean, obviously, you know, like we were trying to get Sam Bankman-Fried to be a keynote speaker at our show right before he got busted. Like this only in crypto do we run into this thing where people can't make it to shows because they've been arrested. But you know, like to be fair, a lot of people were fooled.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's at the FTX level, but I mean, even at a protocol level, there are protocols that you just see people ripping their assets out of, bridging across and, you know, going up the chain, you know, whether it's to Polygon, to Arbitrum, you know, back to Ethereum and back to Bitcoin. And so you start to see that kind of explosion across the layer ones and layer twos that we've had the last 2 years. You know, there's consolidation that happens there, and people are just evaluating, you know, where we trust, what we believe in. And, you know, I think that consolidation is, you know, is a very thoughtful one around, you know, what continues to matter about, you know, what this industry has as a point of difference to traditional finance. The other kind of aspect, which I'll just touch on, I'm sure that the other panels will have a view on, is what we are actually starting to see in places like MakerDAO, where they're, you know, proactively, you know, bringing traditional finance products on chain, and they're hybridizing the approach now. You know, they're putting the DAOs are voting and putting, you know, significant amount of assets into yield bearing accounts in traditional finance, and they're having a relationship between what exists in the traditional finance space with their assets and what exists in the, you know, in the you know, in the on-chain environment, you know, for their DAO as well. And so that hybridization, excuse me, is just, you know, part of the evolution of where, you know, where the asset classes are going. You know, and one thing that kind of becomes important, and we talked about it, you know, in one of the Twitter spaces recently, is just the concept of, okay, well, if we are going to be cherry picking the best of traditional finance and applying it to, and hybridizing it with, what is, incredibly valuable about the decentralized space is, you start to see that, well, how do users start to contemplate the actual, at a system-wide level, contemplate the risks about, interacting with, a DeFi or, the crypto landscape. And so, we're super bullish on projects that are, putting that, looking at actually providing clarity or risk-weighted clarity over, these varied asset classes and protocols, and helping, users, and helping, projects get a clear understanding of what it means to hold, a USDT versus USDC versus any other sort of basket of goods that exist, that, can generate your return and things like that. So, very broadly, still extremely optimistic, and, the stats and the flow of money kind of bears it out that, this industry is evolving and evolving in a sort of in a sensible way, even if, there's noise happening at government level, which is, is fine, but it's still, the core builders and the core kind of creations that are happening are much more sophisticated than, what's existed historically, and, gives a lot of hope for what's coming down the line.
Mm-hmm. I agree. MakerDAO is a great project, by the way. It's really made it a lot more possible for lots of other projects to explore DAO governance. Josh, do you think it's possible? I mean, first of all, it's funny in its implications to think about, like, essentially having our own global bureaucratic structure by combining the DAO governances of different projects to have them work cooperatively. But this is something that traditional finance hasn't done exceptionally well without regulation. Do you think that since we're trying to build a bright and better new thing, build our own version of what traditional finance was and has failed to be, do you think that it's possible we could work somehow more cooperatively on a distributed basis?
Well, it's interesting you bring up Maker. I think they're maybe a bad example. Their governance has struggled a lot. Lots of drama. I mean, you've got Rune, who's basically got unilateral control over the protocol and is pushing, his own ESG agenda of, like, hey, let's take $50 million and donate it to, fighting climate change, right? So there are a lot of people in the industry who are saying, hey, that's not what I signed up for. That's not what this is about. What are we doing here? And so I think that highlights kind of the challenge we have, which is, at the end of the day, we're still humans with our own agendas and our own flaws, and that are going to, and those problems are going to exhibit themselves, right? And so we need to do a better job at creating systems that are more resilient to our worst tendencies, that desire to take back control and push our own agendas. And so, there's a lot of people who are looking around saying, hey, where is a truly decentralized stablecoin that I can use? And we're having to reassess our previous thoughts around what a flight to safety meant, right? A lot of people got out of volatile assets and they went to USDC, and because they thought that was the safe haven, and everyone was flooding USDT. They're saying, hey, like, people have been flooding USDT for forever. And then with the whole Silvergate and SVB situation, you saw USDC fall to 90 cents. And suddenly the safe option was now the one that was risky, and everyone was rushing to try and swap into USDT instead. And of course, DAI dropped to 90 cents as well, because it's, at this point, it's just a loose condom on USDC, right? And they're continuing to push more and more into taking on real world assets, which just exposes them more and more to the all of the flaws we have on the fiat system, right? Of not knowing for sure whether the backing collateral's there, whether the bank that they've put those funds in, or whether those assets are safe. And that's not even mentioning all of the challenges we have with an overzealous government that may come in and seize it or freeze those assets at any point in time. So there's a real need for some sort of stablecoin that isn't at the mercy of these fiat systems. And we know the Luna model, Terra Luna model, doesn't work. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't give up trying. That there's got to be some way we can do this, that doesn't make us repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, guys. I'm really glad we got a chance to talk about decentralization. I'm a big believer that it's something that we need to continue to stick to in order to avoid having more bad actors, allegedly misusing people's money and trust, and continue to advance the space in Web3. I think it's something we absolutely need to not lose track of, even during the next bull market. So thank you to Lucas, Seb, Josh, and Joshua for coming to talk to us today. We appreciate your participation, and we hope to talk to you again on Twitter Spaces and on more of our virtual shows. It's been awesome having you on.
Great being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. So, okay. So, Jose, that was
interesting, huh?
Yeah. What do you think?
So,
what'd you take away from that?
Yeah, there were like several talking points that I was super interested. For example, that I noticed that like human tends to rely on like when they have to take big responsibilities, they want people to represent them, and not necessarily like making like a super democratized, everyone is voting. Instead, like choosing representatives to make smarter decisions. That's like super interesting, and how things on the private end develop like a similar than the governments maybe 200 years ago. And it seems that it's something like the nature of humanity to tend to that kind of sovereignty. And well, mainly that I was like super interested with that section of the talk. And any takeaways, you, sir?
Yeah, I am happy to see the idealism that still exists in this space. I gotten uncomfortable during the real like the grimiest part, or the most wildly enthusiastic part of like 2021. Nobody seemed to give a crap about whether things were decentralized or not. Nobody was paying attention to that. It was all about hype. And I'm not knocking hype. Everything that we do is still, all of the value of all of this is staked in belief. All of the value of crypto and of all currencies is staked in belief, after all. So it's a necessary part of it. But the wild enthusiasm can get kind of carried away. I hope that we remember our core values a little bit more going into the next bull run, which will no doubt be very, very soon, I hope.
Yeah, so, and also it was like, it was interesting to see how these different projects that failed and stole money allegedly from everyone. Sometimes the decentralization is what failed, but in most of the cases, it was not the decentralization, it was the centralized party. For example, fractional reserve systems, or scammers like actually using the funds for things that were not intended, right? So if we want to generate mass adoption, we must set certain security boundaries and specific regulations for this kind of industry to thrive, and to give some security to the users. So I would like to follow to the second panel and see what our experts have to say related to securing projects and how to protect investors, right?
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Let's keep the show moving. Thank you so much for joining us, our esteemed guests. We have Feroz from Tron DAO, Enterprise Lead. Very nice to have you here, Feroz. Thank you for being here. Akash, from Portfolio Manager from Yield App, and Maria, a CEO of StealthX. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Hey, guys.
How y'all doing today? Hopefully, I got all the pronunciations correct. I'm excellent at screwing up pronunciations on air. So
it's always good for these events,
Yeah, exactly. But thank you so much for coming and joining. I mean, the original bridge security, cross-chain security, because at this point, there's pretty much no one arguing that we don't have that it isn't, that we're looking at anything other than a multi-chain future. Nobody's prognosticating that all of this is just going to run on, Ethereum or even Polygon for that matter, right? Clearly there bridges or some way to secure transactions between chains is going to continue to be a big issue. Vitalik Buterin, who really is, quite far-seeing, correctly observed this, and then subsequently there were a bunch of hacks, which brought no suspicion to Buterin. I noticed he did call it, and then I'm just kidding. Clearly, Vitalik was not behind this, but I also looked up did you know that according to a recent report, we have already had in 2023, which is, about a newborn baby of a year, or at least a toddler, we've already had 119 million in crypto stolen in 19 breaches, according to Crystal Blockchain report. And of course, it's not just cross-chain bridges, which are regarded as a security risk. We've got DeFi-specific attacks, extraction attacks, ZK hacks. Obviously, we have enough FUD in the space as it is. What can projects do? What must projects do in order to keep investor confidence or consumer confidence high and keep people involved in this projects? Because I kind of, it breaks my heart a little bit. I feel like every time there's a major explosion in their space, I think to myself, great, big money owns a little bit more of what Web3 built, and they buy it cheap, right? They wait until something fails and then they buy it out. So since I got a reaction out of you, Maria, let's start with you. What is our responsibility as projects, as chains, to be able to provide assurances for our customers, given that hackers are only going to, and bad actors of all sorts, scammers, are only becoming more clever as they test the bounds of blockchain.
That's so true, actually. Yeah, thank you for inviting me over here. I have a little bit of a cold, so my voice is kind of but you can always get a reaction out of me. Yeah, I believe that these years, actually the past 2 years, after this massive crypto boost that we've seen a year ago, I believe, I'm lost in time. I think it was a year and a half ago or a year ago. We started to get all sorts of scam projects, of scammers, of hackers, who have always been around, but now it kind of got to a scale where it can't really be ignored anymore. But with the, I believe that with what you have mentioned is the problem of crypto being kind of too centralized at times, and crypto being in the hands of those who can control it, meaning the companies, meaning the projects who can rug pull stuff like this. So my idea, it's kind of harsh, but my idea is that we kind of tend to forget what crypto was all about when it first started. So it should be decentralized, and we should be the people. We, not meaning CEO of Steldex, Maria Corolla, but we, the people, should be in charge of the money that we're given. Hence, decentralized projects, truly decentralized projects, self-custody projects will be more highlighted probably in the past kind of several months. In the beginning of this year, we have started talking about it already when we see massive, what seems like corporations, when we are working all in this field and thinking about it, go down and people go into jail and the scandals being all over. Probably this is the way of really turning to decentralized and self-custody options. It has been around for years, and it's pretty obvious that every time that something happens, we should think that we're doing something wrong, including us as people who are making projects, and including users who are really starting to get questions like, should I trust a centralized exchange with my funds? Probably I shouldn't. Probably I should have a second option. Probably I should distribute. Probably I should get a hardware wallet and so on. And this is where services like ours step in, because we are a self-custodial and non-custodial exchange, and self-custodial wallets that I've worked for many years too. And this whole idea of kind of gathering up the projects that could help facilitate safe crypto usage and put it in your own hands, and at least eliminate the risk of companies going down and things like that. It is useful. However, it still doesn't eliminate the problem that we all can cause. So like on Telegram, people ask you, can you send me crypto? Like my Binance hack was just blocked. And you're like, yeah, sure. Yeah, dude, I'm going to help you. Like, please don't do it. Like, this is definitely a scam. Some people just don't understand it. And this is very obvious when somebody talks, just like in here, we talk about it like, haha, yeah, please don't fall for that. But people make accounts of like your friends and your family members asking you for money. They are creative. And with this enhanced level of creativity, people should be on the lookout and really not trust any information that you're given online. This is super obvious. Like I'm Captain Obvious in this group probably, but you should really pay attention to these things. Probably that answers the question. I'm happy to elaborate more.
No, that's
I
good.
do.
It's true. There certainly is responsibility on both sides. I'm sorry, Feroz, you were going to add something?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, traditionally, like you were talking about bridges first, right? So we had lock and mint bridges that were a big pain point. A lot of people were getting assets stolen from where they were locked within a bridge. So on like a protocol and a solution level, we started moving away from that. We started doing burn and mint. So there's no old assets for people to steal. There's a lot of different ways that we've kind of evolved as an industry to fix some of the issues that have propped up as we evolve so quickly. But at the end of the day, like Maria said, it's about self-sovereignty, right? It's about understanding what is yours and how to secure it for yourself and not in somebody else's possession, whether that be while you're bridging it or even in like a centralized exchange. So a lot of big hacks, Axie happened, a lot of wormhole style hacks happened, and people started pulling a lot of their assets, putting them in centralized exchanges because they felt a little more secure. It was like a traditional bank. Let me just put it in my savings and I'll go back when I feel a little bit more safe. And we saw what happened with that over the past year. And so now self-sovereignty has become a very, very critical conversation. And it's something that I think a lot of newer people in the industry need to focus on a lot more, is how do I really secure my own assets within my possession and not in someone else's possession. Yeah, there's a lot of companies that are bringing solutions in that vein for the public, but even then, now you have so many new providers of security solutions that you have to be very careful as to who you trust with, the solution you're using to now secure your assets. So I think it's a much bigger conversation, and there's a lot of education that needs to be created. There's a lot of stuff that people still need to do their own research on when it comes to securing your own assets. And I think that's a big point that Maria made was, a lot of us in the industry, we feel like some of these things are just second nature. Like it's so obvious not to give your seed phrase to someone on Telegram. But I've had close friends of mine that have been trading and buying NFTs and crypto for years now. And when they had an issue trying to cash out a specific cryptocurrency, they go in the Discord that they trust. And then when they put the question out there, they've got 4 different scammers in their DMs like, oh, I'll help you. And it becomes a lot easier to scam someone when they're in the position of asking for help, because then they're open to hearing what somebody that they don't know has to tell them and assuming that it's something for their benefit. So there's a lot of old school like con vectors that are coming back into this space, and you really got to be careful as to who you trust, even when it's learning about how to secure your assets or anything in that vein. You got to be
Totally
very
agree. Because a lot of times self-custody is centered as a big solution, but it's just the beginning. Then you have like a totally different responsibility over your own assets, and as you said, you have to do your own research.
I agree, but at the same time, guys, to play devil's advocate here, people who trusted Sam Bankman-Fried, and I mean, the big investors that I've spoken to, they felt they did do their own research. They did. They asked who, they looked at what other VCs have already believed in Sam Bankman-Fried and said, okay, this guy is bona fide. Apparently, this project is bona fide because these other big VCs have already said so. And scammers are ubiquitous and are forever trying new ways. Yesterday, I actually warranted my own fake Twitter account, as in I had an imitator, and it took me about, which I guess is a sign of like, hey, good for me. I have an imitator now. Actually, they're down now, but it took me 15 minutes to figure out what was going on for a second there when I kept retweeting my own stuff to realize, oh no, wait, this is somebody else. I was partially because I'm a ridiculous person, but really, like, we're asking a lot of people. We don't. I mean, even in traditional finance, at least they have safety deposit boxes, right? That's you're not. That's some sort of balance between they're holding it for me, but I still have sovereignty over it, and I know what's in there, and the bank doesn't necessarily know. With crypto, all we're asking people to do, people who can't remember their Netflix passwords, and I'm saying this because I relate, all you have to do is just keep track of this seed phrase and then hold it in cold storage, and don't worry, because if you get this wrong, you just lose everything. So that's okay. I get it. Like, I believe, of course, that self-sovereignty and self-custody has to be part of the equation. But are we shifting the blame where we as an industry maybe need to step up and do something a little more for people, especially if what we're reaching out to is a mainstream audience?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, as you were talking, very recently we went to ETH Denver and heard a ton of amazing talks about account abstraction. Even Vitalik very recently talked about community-owned accounts and account abstraction, ways to secure your accounts that don't necessarily require new users to remember a 12-word, passphrase and be able to secure that properly. You can have social accounts and share approvals with people in your community, people in your family, people you trust, as well as have much, much easier and more secure onboarding processes so people don't have to remember those 12 words. I think as an industry, yeah, you're 100% right. We don't want to put that pressure on the new users, especially people that don't have a ton of experience in the space. We don't want to scare them off and say, well, everything is your responsibility, and here's this brand new way of securing something, and now you just have to get used to it. I think as an industry, like I said, we evolve so fast that sometimes we break things in the process, but right behind that, there are a ton of new solutions, and they're usually a lot more secure and a lot more sophisticated than what was there, very, very recently. So I think account abstraction is a very important thing to look at right now in that space.
I want to hear from Akash as well, because we skipped around you. How would you describe, the responsibility of projects in order to create a safe environment where especially newish retail consumers can feel comfortable? Because otherwise, what we're asking them to do when it comes to self-custody is going to sound ridiculous to people who are not familiar with what's expected out of them in Web3, and it becomes a reason to not engage, which of course the majority of people don't right now. So what can projects do to help bridge that if we truly want mass adoption?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Just taking you back earlier to a point you made, that we've had around 119 million worth of hacks and exploits this year. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. I think it's 119.
That means we're doing really well. As per Chain Analysis report, we only had I think we had a total of 4 billion in 2022, stolen through bridge hacks, compromised wallets, just general exploits of DeFi protocols. So, we're doing quite well comparatively. But yeah, I know there's a lot of talk which has happened around self-custody and how we can educate the even the people who are in DeFi right now, as well as the people we want to onboard. But the reality is the amount of funds lost through wallet compromises, or people losing their seed phrase, or people losing their Bored Apes through some complex phishing attacks, or usually simple ones. It's significantly I think it's 1% compared to what the amount of funds lost in DeFi protocols, including bridges and whatnot. So whilst education and teaching people how to take care of their own wallets is important, I think that there's a whole different issue on how we have to make DeFi protocols and the DeFi ecosystem as a whole safer before we can even, we should even consider like focusing on the wallets part. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's 4 billion hacked and lost funds last year. A lot of them were in bridge hacks, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. But yeah, we need to, for the new users particularly, I think we need to have a different sort of on-chain finance. I really do believe that. I know everyone on this call is a high promoter of DeFi. I love DeFi. We love transacting. If we want to onboard, our mothers and fathers, the people, very, very new people, we need to have some sort of network guardrails or some safety protocols for them to transact on-chain. There really isn't any kind of environment like that at the moment. But, as we do onboard new users, we're going to have to figure something else out rather than just, throwing them into the wind, throwing them to the wolves and, just going, here's DeFi, figure it out. I think we'll see that. I think maybe base chain on Coinbase, the one Coinbase is making might be a bridge to that, as well as something we're building at Haven 1, which is like on-chain finance with guardrails. There's a few options out there that hopefully will come out in the future.
Yeah, I know that you specifically were prepared. You're prepared to talk about these bridge hacks. So let's get into that a little bit. I mean, clearly that has been a point of contention, and clearly, if people are distrusting the ability of one chain to interact with another chain, that is a gigantic problem for the overall growth of the Web3 space. How do we go about, hitting these inflection points that you can see how they're points of vulnerability between chains? It's easier to secure on chain rather than this kind of little standalone app that allows these two chains to communicate. How do we go about making that happen? Let's go ahead and take that. I'll take that to you first, Maria.
Oh, yeah, to me.
Why not?
Okay.
You're unmuted,
Yeah,
so
sure. I mean, yeah, if you're unmuted, then you're the first one to go. I mean, with bridges, it's kind of like a complicated topic. It's been around for many years, at least as I remember. When I entered the crypto space, it was already like interoperability and so on. However, people who don't want to trust the app that allows you to swap from one chain to another can also do it on chain, on many exchanges that are around for a while and work old-fashioned way. This kind of brings us back to the question whether old-fashioned kind of services, decentralized one services, I mean, not DEXs, but like instant exchanges and so on, are better in a way and safer in a way than what we can have with DEXs in the modern sense of this word, and in centralized exchanges, and whether it is more user-friendly, because sometimes it's not, to be honest. As a person who works in an instant exchange, I can say that it's not. Probably nobody will blame me for that. In here, we need to probably think about what our goals are. Do we need to do it every day? Do we need to bridge every day? Do we trade? Do we just swap one token for another token? Do we migrate? Do we do it on like a massive level? So all these questions kind of highlight one problem per user that they have. If they do it less frequently and don't want to sacrifice their security, then they can just do it through an exchange. Probably it's not going to cause them any problems. They can do it wallet, from a personal wallet to a personal wallet, not meeting any bridges in the sense that that can be hacked. If they need to do it on a massive scale and need to automate it somehow, then we need to probably step up the game that we have for bridges, and we need to eliminate. This is another harsh idea, but we need to eliminate some of the projects that are not quite there yet, because this is what usually happens to the market when the market goes down. Mm-hmm. And we have seen that recently.
There's a process of self-elimination going on right now, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Like right now, we're actually going through another up kind of phase on the market. So now we'll see more projects pop up, But then when there's another down, we'll see them go. This is what always happens. With the bridges, we have so many chains now that we can't really avoid this topic. And we can't say that, okay, nobody will want to bridge, that everybody will just use Bitcoin. That was an idea, but like that's not happening. So I believe that the bridges probably need to be kind of regulated in a way, at least from the point of audit, at least from the point of some kind of standard, not regulated from the governmental point of way, but at least by the standard that we have in the field. And again, it comes to research and it comes to kind of trust that we have already discussed. And this is kind of like a question that we will have forever, as long as this, like the market stands and as long as this field stands, really.
In terms of regulated, though, who do you have in mind to do the regulating? Because as we've seen in traditional finance and in DeFi, fintech, regulators are only as good as their mandate and who's paying them. So I'm a little bit afraid of, like, if I am XYZ crypto or a blockchain concern, and I have to go through an auditing process, well, I'm paying those auditors if I have private auditors. Is it possible for Web3 to create its own, again, regulatory function in this regard, or some sort of standard? I keep bringing that up because people are automatically angry when you talk about the SEC, and frankly, given the Coinbase thing lately, that's why I think it's funny to talk about nice things. I read up about Gary Gensler. He's won several awards as well. He's a big runner too. But it makes people automatically angry, and that's understandable. I get what I mean. That Coinbase thing, that's pretty shady. But like, how can we say this is not adequate? Don't control us if we are failing to provide our own solutions as an industry. Feroz, do you have a solution for us? How do we handle this? It seems like we've been reticent to work collectively up till now.
If I had a solution, I would probably like bring it up already. I think that's really the thing, is that the industry kind of, I don't want to say the industry leaders, because this sounds so cheesy. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, like, who are these leaders exactly? Probably people who are active in the industry, at least, and who are known for their achievements at some point. Probably people who are in development really more than in marketing or in management. There needs to be a sort of a board. So if we talk about the regulation, it's standard, not regulation from the point of everything that you've mentioned, but the point of a standard for the industry, there needs to be a kind of regulatory organ that is formed from the, to be kind of governed. So what I'm talking about is the governance. It sounds super unreal, to be honest. Like, probably you would argue me, and probably you would say that we are going to it, but I'm pessimistic, and I've always been. And everything that comes to governance all kind of happens, well, in some point it happens okay, in some point it kind of like, but there's never been like a perfect solution, to be honest. But probably we will get to it as more as we mature as an industry, and the more people join it, because there is a need for this, and there is a the more billions of dollars, equivalents of billions of dollars, are gonna go away in hacks and in scams and in rug pulls, the more thinking there is about the standard that needs to be implemented. And probably one way or another, people who are gathering in all these conferences and speaking from like YouTube or from actual physical kind of event will be willing to have this controlled, but they need to be trusted. This is another very, very deep topic. Like, who do we trust exactly?
Right. I want to, go ahead, Frost.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I want to reiterate exactly what Maria said. I think it has to be something that comes out of the community, and I think it needs to be developer focused regulation. Like I wouldn't even use the term regulation. I feel like that makes it sound a little too strict. But it's more of like a standard, just setting a standard like we have for certain tokens, a certain functionality. There's a standard way to do it that's safe, that's been tested over and over. And I think that same concept needs to be used for most innovation in this industry. Is who's working on it the most, which products are we using, who built those products, how did they build it, what was their initial focus, right? Like I'm a part-time builder, and I like to always focus on security first. And anybody I talk to, that's really our first thing is, how are we going to secure the money involved? How are we going to secure our users? How do we build the most secure protocol? And there are a lot of traditional attack vectors as well as new attack vectors that we haven't even come across yet. So I think it's tough to say one specific group of people or a specific body of people that needs to either regulate or create the standard. But I feel like it's going to come about naturally. The standard itself is going to come about naturally. Who comes up to talk about it, discuss it, and really make it the standard in the public eye? That's an amazing question. I wish I had an answer for you. I wouldn't even know where to start.
But Feroz, in the true decentralized blockchain, anyone can spin up contracts and create a cross-chain messaging app. So a bridge can't really be stopped unless, you create like a network with guardrails and where you can vote, and all the validators can decide what contracts they want to be, what contracts they want to be able to do deployed, and what contracts they want to let go, kind of thing. So that's the other issue. I don't think there's really any self-regulation that can happen until we create like a semi-decentralized platform, I suppose. I don't see.
Well, probably you can at least stop people from using it. That's probably.
I was gonna say
people,
natural regulation is people don't use it. Like once people don't use it, it's not going to stick around much longer. And anybody that tries to follow that same concept, if it never picks up steam, that's auto-regulated at that point, in my eyes.
Yeah, people just. If there's incentives there, though, people love using new shiny things, as we've seen in DeFi. If people have incentives to use the bridge, they will use it. If there's free money and free tokens involved, that's just going to happen. I like the idea of pushing for at least one external auditor, and something what people don't do is have an active bug bounty. Like I think that's honestly the most important thing any bridge or any DeFi protocol can have: active, ongoing bug bounty, which is like a reasonable value. I think which one was the most recent one? Like the Ronin bridge. I don't even think they had an ongoing bug bounty. I think Euler Finance, which got I think it was 2 weeks ago, it got hacked about 2 weeks ago. Had a bug bounty of like, I don't know, less than $1 million perhaps, and then they had about 193 million exploited. Things like that. Like there should be incentives for white hackers to test a few things out in DeFi, break things, but also return the funds. There's really good bug bounty programs in DeFi right now. People just don't use them, and that's maybe there needs to be more accountability. That's one of the other things. They use investor funds to build something. They use client funds to generate fees on the platform. And if it all goes kaput, then there's no really accountability to the people who deployed the contracts and ran the platform. And then they can move on to the next thing. So yeah, a bunch of things I think we can kind of work on. No all-encompassing one solution, but yeah, long way to go in this area.
Yeah, and I have to say, guys, again, to play devil's advocate a little bit here, our experiments IRL with self-regulation. Well, how about when the auto industry was self-regulating in like the 50s and the 70s? We had great big steel engines thundering down the highway with no seatbelts and a glass to like we the early pharma industry, at least here in the U.S., as self-regulating. Like the only thing business really seems to respond to is profit incentive, and yes, it's true that eventually the system will sort itself out, Darwinism style, in that with enough loss, eventually they'll have to respond to that, and they'll make a turn. But it seems like we could, even though I know that there's a great sentiment of wanting to remain independent of regulators in general. I mean, I don't know. I guess bounties are an attempt to profit incentive, working out these bugs. But like, can you ever offer if I am the kind of guy who can work out, or group of people who can work out an exploit on blockchain, I'm already fairly capable in some ways and fairly determined. The amount of money I can extract is probably not going to be counterbalanced by this bug. And of course, it's a whole other rabbit hole, but we've got AI to worry about as well now. AI already writing smart contracts for that matter. And the first thing I think when I hear that, this is my cynicism, Maria, is I think, oh, good. Now it'll be much easier for people with bad intent to create, impenetrable smart contracts that would be very difficult to review, that also have an exploit built into them, et cetera, et cetera. So things are only going to get harder. It seems like we are due as an industry to do something about it, but the incentive isn't there. So if our goal, and part of our function in Web3 is to incentivize positive participation in the community, how do we incentivize this? How do we attack this collectively, since that is part of our strength? Anybody want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. So that's a great time.
That's right. I didn't say that.
Actually, about that, I believe that crypto. Okay, we're still young. Don't forget that. And
not me personally, but the space is, yes.
Yeah, I still consider myself young, please. But yeah, the space is young, and we're still mostly caring about our own little houses, like our own projects, our own kind of space that we work in. Probably, like, if you're in NFTs, you will probably be caring more about NFTs than anything else. If you have your own blockchain, you'll be caring about it mostly. And we have these gatherings of people who work in crypto, who work in Web3, who build in Web3, and we say lots of things here, but we're still not quite there to really unite, because there are so many of us. That's the first thing. And because we have so much to do, there's the second thing, unfortunately, that sometimes it's just hard to kind of, I wouldn't say it is hard to find motivation to do it, because the motivation is clearly there, but find personal strength to really go out there and ask, like, Vitalik, like, do you want to come over for a panel and be a judge for all our, like, crappy decentralized projects, and like, review them and I don't know, see the code. There are people who do it professionally. There are audit firms, who can be called for money, as you have mentioned, and they can audit your project for people who want this, at least, because most people just don't want it, I believe. They can do it, and they can raise a statement like, okay, we found this and that, but they rarely publish it if that's something really vicious. So they keep it kind of like behind closed doors. I've seen several cases of the reports being actually published, and the companies that these reports were referred to kind of just try to kind of get it all under the carpet like it never happened, because it's definitely not in their profit for this to go out. So this needs to just be, I believe we will grow to that. That's that's not super clear with the ETA of when we're going to grow to that, but it needs to happen at some point, probably with the next purge of projects, when the market goes down, when at least there are people left who want to be in a more refined space.
Akash had a couple of comments in our private chat to correct my characterization. I do stir the pot a little bit, guys. After all, I wouldn't say I'm always playing dumb. Sometimes I'm genuinely being ignorant, but sometimes I'm trying to evince responses from people. So yes, please correct the way I characterized the bounties on bugs.
No, I'm just saying, like, if you have a huge, if you stole 1,000 ETH today, Justin, it'd be very difficult for you to get that off chain. Like, it's going to be, all the exchanges are monitored. They're tracking wallets. There's Usually, USDC can be stopped, paused on chain. USDT, we've all seen this happen many times. Even DAI, they had the backdoor proxied contracts got upgraded. It's going to be very difficult to get funds off chain if you steal them. So sometimes, usually most of the time, it's more beneficial for a hacker just to accept the bug bounty or the 10% reward that they offer. Then it makes it all legal. They doesn't have to look around and worry about being tracked all the time, especially with so many on-chain tracking tools we have. It's really easy to kind of get away from being followed on chain these days. So yeah, it's just.
I was gonna. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, especially with, like you mentioned, AI, not only is it helping create smart contracts for people that maybe have bad intentions or don't know how to create their own, we're also getting a ton of AI tools that help track bad actors and help track wallets and connections 2, 3, 4, 5 connections later to see if they're related to anything, hack related or anything in that sense. So I think where we have negative things that are moving forward using AI, there's also a ton of positive and security focused things that are also moving forward using AI. And that's where my focus is right now. When I look at security, I tend to look more at what is being built that will help me secure what I'm doing or help our users secure what they're doing and feel more confident in what and who they're interacting with. And I think that like social signal of these are things that are tested and true and safe. And I've personally been able to look at this dashboard and analyze who I'm interacting with is going to be very, very crucial moving forward.
Yeah, that's something that one of our viewers, Malachi, pointed out. I know that there are use cases out there where they're using AI to audit smart contracts. So the excellent point, Malachi. You've actually had 2 comments I was going to put up there, but I don't want to interrupt the flow and everything. We're going to move on to our next panel because we're already 2 minutes over time. But thank you so much, guys, for I believe that we are right. Aren't we due for the next panel? Yes. So we're going to bring the Cosmos projects on. Feroz, Akash, Maria, you should all come on my Spaces show. First of all, we'll do mine and Jose's. We're going to do a wrap-up show on Thursday. I hope you're able to make it to that. But there's just because this is literally, I literally learned during these things. This is literally a deeper discussion than we have time for right now. But thank you so much for joining in the conversation. It's been great having you on.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. All right.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. So very excited, Jose, to go ahead and to get these next people out there. I'm a big fan of Cosmos. I've been following them over the past couple of years. I think their interchain strategy is really promising. So you want to go ahead and just bring our guests on? Why don't we go ahead and do this?
Let's see. Right. Aaron in the background. Thanks. Welcome, Saki.
It's great to be here.
Welcome, Sergey. Welcome, Stani. Welcome, Vallejo.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We've got Zaki. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your project really quick?
Yeah, my name is Zaki Munyan, co-founder of Sommelier Finance. I've been working on things in Cosmos since 2014, and so been through the journey for a long time. And Sommelier is an on-chain asset manager expressed as a Sommelier as a Cosmos chain. So we use a Cosmos chain to manage the strategies, and then the strategies actually get executed on other chains like Ethereum right now. And there's a lot of we are planning on incorporating more chains using Axelar, and our protocol has a lot in common with what Vallejo is doing with Quasar. So it's like all on theme and about the composability of Cosmos. Other places they compose smart contracts, we compose chains.
Okay, perfect. Vallejo, it's the first time I'm talking to you too. I'm more familiar with Axelar and Sunny I've spoken to a number of times. Just go ahead and introduce yourself in just a sentence or two, please.
Sure, thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. My name is Valentin Pletnev. I'm co-founder and lead here at Quasar Labs. We're building the Quasar chain. We've launched the chain last week, a Cosmos L1 app chain that brought the first interchain vaults to the Cosmos. So we use Cosmos and smart contracts and IBC to run strategies across chains without having more security assumptions than the underlying chains. So we don't use bridges. We don't use Axler. We purely use IBC and have pushed it to the limits in the last week, and have also filled the cap of our first osmosis vault as we speak an hour ago. So in 4 days, we reached 500,000 Osmo in our first strategy, and I'm pretty excited to be the new kid on the block.
Fantastic. Good to have you aboard. Sonny, why don't you come on and say hi? Good to see you again.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I'm one of the co-founders of Osmosis. Osmosis is the largest DEX in the Cosmos ecosystem, and it is a DEX app chain. So it is a DEX built on its own custom chain. It's sort of the primary liquidity venue for most of the assets in the Cosmos ecosystem, and it's also a little bit of a DeFi L1 ecosystem in its own right as well, with a number of products like sort of being built on top as well.
Right. It's fantastic. It's a great project. We've interviewed in all sorts of different formats. I've got another feature that I'll probably submit today. It'll come out tomorrow, based on today's interview as well. And Sergey, we've not spoken before, but if I remember correctly, you are one of the OGs in the Cosmos space. So I'm very happy to have you here. How are you, Sergey?
Great to be here. So I'm Sergey. I'm one of the co-founders of Axler. Axler is a decentralized interoperability stack. I don't know if I can call myself OG in the Cosmos space. I mean, I think like these guys have been around for longer. Probably maybe an OG in the crypto blockchain space, but maybe not Cosmos particularly. But it's been excited to work with all of these guys here for the last few years.
Well, I'm excited to have you here to talk about mesh security. Sonny, of course, famously donned a what would it be called? That was a chainmail tunic, essentially. Did you get that from a Ren fair, Sonny? Where did you get your chainmail tunic? You didn't make it yourself, I imagine.
Unfortunately, not. Or fortunately, I've seen people make chainmail. That is
I've known people who make chainmail.
Yeah, that's a labor of love. I went and got it from the place where I get most of my stuff, which is Amazon.com.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I honestly, it used to be you actually had to go to a Ren fair to pick up that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you introduced the idea of mesh security more or less around Cosmoverse in 2022 in Q4. I have to say part of why I'm excited to talk about it is because I understood sort of the most superficial implications, but I don't think I got the whole picture the first 20 times that I heard about it, essentially, because we talk about it as a security measure, and that makes sense. So if we compare this, Sonny had talked about challenging the spoke and hub model. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, the rest of the crypto ecosystem is taking this very hub and spoke approach to security, and how these like ecosystems are the topology of these ecosystems, right? Whether you have Ethereum managed rollups, it's like, okay, Ethereum is the settlement system for all its rollups. You have, Avalanche's system, you still have like one base P chain. Polkadot, they have their relay chain. Everyone is sort of following this like hub and spoke model of the world. And I treat this as like the empire and colonies like version of how security works, where empires, provide security to their colonies, but in return they sort of demand taxes and have a lot of like lock-in and like loss of sovereignty, and that is like how most places are going about security. In Cosmos, we're trying to build a system that has no single central point of failure. It is a bottom-up Hayekian system. Like it looks like a mesh, right? And if you look at the actual topology, if you go to hub.mintscan.io and you click the IBC network tab, you can see this like beautiful like visualization of the IBC network. And you'll see it is a very mesh system. There is no hub and spoke architecture to it. And so mesh security is this idea like, hey, if the communication in Cosmos is happening via this hubless system, why isn't security also happening in the same way? And so we look, the example I like to give is like NATO. NATO is a security alliance of countries. So instead of like this like empire colony model, we're going for the sovereign nation state model. But like NATO is a group of sovereign nation states that, you know, they still have their own militaries and security systems, but they're able to pool their security together into one more powerful than any of its parts, right?
Right.
And so the idea behind mesh security is how can many Cosmos app chains like pool their security together. Like instead of right today, Osmosis is secured by the Osmo token, Axelar is secured by the Axel token, Quasar is secured by the Quasar token, I guess. I don't know if the token's live yet or not, but Sommelier is secured by the Som token. But it's like, why if we could like create a mechanism where each of these chains is actually secured by something close to the sum of these market caps together. So instead of relying on one asset like everyone else is, like, oh, we're all going to put all our eggs in one basket with like ETH, right? And rely on that as our security mechanism. It's like, hey, we can actually have this more, you know, instead of everyone having to leak value, pay taxes to the empire so that the empire has enough value to you know, provide security to everyone. Instead, we can all sort of just like pool, you know, accrue value in our own tokens, but then pool their security together for something.
It makes a lot of sense, but you know, this is what I mean by at first blush, not understanding all of the implications. You know, Zaki, of course, like we have to bear in mind, to extend Sonny's metaphor, that some people have reacted to some acts of NATO as being essentially aggressive at times. Like, you know, he's talking about a greater union, and I respect the hell out of the concept. It's something that a blockchain, that the Web3 world hasn't been exceptional at doing up till now, is working collectively, you know, cross project. But you know, what is your project's position on this? You know, does this create opportunities for you? I've always loved the open flexibility of Cosmos, and definitely that's in there. But there's a tremendous amount of implications to the mesh security idea.
So, I mean, I think one of the things that has I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about the idea of mesh security is aligning compositionality with security, right? So, you know, Axelar and Osmosis compose together, and you know, Axelar is a major source of, you know, tokens of assets from outside of the IBC ecosystem into Osmosis. And what, you know, we're thinking about and working on with Sommelier is offering strategy execution via Axelar. And so one of the things, though, that I generally think is I put mesh security, interchain security in this general category of things that we call restaking primitives, i.e. it's programmable slashing conditions that allow you to expand what is being secured by a given amount of stake, and then reciprocally recognizing that there is a new slashing condition and giving people incentives and voting power for providing that. And you know, you see this happening in the Ethereum ecosystem with Eigenware, and you see this happening in the Cosmos ecosystem with you know, slashing and staking over IBC, the ability to recognize double signing evidence, you know, building more modules that allow for the expansion of stake. And I think like all of these things come together in a lot of ways, right? You know, it's very challenging in the ecosystem right now. Liquidity is low. the amount of staking incentives, that the ecosystem can support, is a challenge. Every project is trying to use token emissions in the most economically efficient way. And there's a real opportunity with mesh security and evolving restaking primitives in Cosmos to really start to optimize these values. So if the security of a bunch of chains that compose together is collectively incentivized, then the burden on the liquidity of any given chain goes down. And so there's just this I think is a very exciting direction to go, and I think there's a possibility of fixing a number of real challenges with the economics of Cosmos chains today.
So I have a question regarding how would this work in practice? Let's say we have a project that the developers team maybe it's not quite there, or maybe what they're bringing to the table, it's not something that works for the community. How do you prevent good projects saving or being prejudiced by being linked with this other project that maybe the market is not in the need of those?
Yeah, so it's up to governance to actually so how mesh security works. So one difference between NATO's model and how we've architected mesh security is NATO is a multilateral treaty. It's like this alliance that all existing members have to vote in new members. Mesh security is actually based off of a number of bidirectional, bilateral security relationships. So let's say, Osmosis and Axelar are running mesh security with each other, and then Quasar and Osmosis and Axelar are running like a mesh security with each other. But now Sommelier wants to enter the mix, right? Maybe Sommelier has this deeper economic relationship with Axelar because they're using it to execute strategies on Ethereum, and maybe they have a relationship with Osmosis because they're executing strategies on Osmosis, but maybe they don't have that much of an economic relationship with Quasar, right? And so it's up to individual it's Osmosis governance that chooses, hey, we want to create this bilateral relationship with Sommelier. Axelar's governance chooses, we want to create this bilateral relationship with Sommelier. And then maybe Quasar and Sommelier are like, oh, we don't need, this is not advantageous for us to make this sort of relationship. So you kind of let the network topology naturally form.
It's interesting, Valentin. You have the newest project, I think, on the panel. You're just launching a chain. Did this flexibility to be able to avail yourself of these resources or not coming from other chains, as well as the independence? Is that what part of your decision to build in Cosmos, to become a part of the Cosmos sphere? Or have you availed yourself of this concept at all in terms of your project?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. We started Quasar around 1.5 years ago, at which point neither of these two options were available. But the reason we chose Cosmos back then is because the issues that we were aiming to solve were very, very visible in Cosmos. Fragmentation of capital, access to the liquidity, especially ability to consolidate user experience into one chain, were things that we aim to target at. And so one thing that we decided very early is that for Quasar to be a successful project 5 to 10 years from now, we need to make sure that Quasar is sovereign. Given that our project is one of the very few projects that doesn't go for high TVL but goes for high AUM, right? As our entire value is sending users funds and liquidity to the pools and to the assets and to the DeFi primitives they want to invest into. Our main purpose is going to be a neutral place for those to be listed. I've called in the past that we're going to be the Switzerland of Cosmos, a neutral player and the guy for you to essentially let you manage your assets to the way that you want to. And so this discussion is very fascinating for us. And I'm also very glad that Sunny mentioned NATO, because while we all know that Switzerland is, very, very closely aligned to the West and to NATO, it's not part of NATO, right? And that's one of the kind of interesting discussions for us at the Quasar perspective, right? Because on one hand, the shared security is an incredible natural fit for us, given that, again, our entire value proposition is setting the rails and setting kind of better ways to manage your assets on things such as osmosis. But on the other hand, if there is let's say, a fight for who is the hub of Cosmos emerging, we are trying not to kind of go into, I would say, mud fights on an ecosystem level, as I'm a true believer that IBC is going to be the unlock between ecosystem fights for those to be put in the past. I think if I look at the current ecosystem fights between different chains, it feels a lot like if you have, the old system reliability engineers fighting over if Azure is better than AWS, right? And would you ever show a user, where their website is hosted? You won't, because the user only cares about how fast the website loads, if their data is safe, and if they're getting what they want, right? I would argue there's a reason Sun uses Amazon. It's a fast platform that gives you everything you need, and he knows his data is safe there. And so if we look at IBC from the Quasar perspective, sure, right now IBC and Cosmos are interchangeable. Depending on how you look at it, either Cosmos will expand with IBC or IBC will expand beyond Cosmos. But in the near future, with IBC going to different chains and essentially being the only protocol where you can have chain-on-chain native token transfers with zero security assumptions on top of that, it's important for us to be a neutral party and to evaluate all choices, including mesh security and interchain or replicated security.
Mm-hmm. Sergey, we haven't heard yet from you on this issue. How is Axelar intersecting with the idea of mesh security? I'm trying to get a sense of how pervasive the use is now, and how much am I getting carried away in terms of looking at this as an ecosystem-wide, a phenomenon, essentially, or potentially, at least, like, if not one union of all chains within the Cosmosphere, then at least lots of individual partnerships. Like is this something that Axelar is doing right now?
Yeah, so we actually have a project that we kicked off with Osmosis team and Juno team, right, trying to define and kind of architect the mesh security and some of its first instantiations. I guess, like, from my view, kind of just to take a step back, right, like, I think this kind of a shared security notions, mesh security and everything else, it's not necessarily something a developer needs to do on day one of their development, right? Like, I would not advise to somebody that's looking to launch an application or even an app chain to say, okay, let's figure out your mesh security strategy, from day one, right? Like, this is more towards, like, you have a product that, you actually have a product market fit, you are looking to scale, you want to make sure that you have economic security that's going to define, your functionality for many years to come, right? And then you have to think about kind of how do you borrow security, how do you lend security, what types of alliances you build, and so on and so forth. So from the Axelar's perspective, folks said, we've been powering a lot of kind of a cross-chain activity for the Cosmos ecosystem over the last year. We're powering a lot of cross-chain activity across CDMs and other chains now. So as the value of the network grows, it's natural that we want to make sure that the base layer is as secure as possible, right? And the strategy there is a combination of on-chain rules. So as an example, like, we'll have things like quadratic voting on-chain that makes sense. It's a function of economic security and everything else, around it. And so for us, the mesh security is kind of a long-term sort of strategy to make sure that the chain itself and its functionality is protected and doesn't have a single vulnerability.
This is such a big topic. I'm constantly stirring the pot in one direction or another. So often I'm saying devil's advocate things, but like to be, my sincere thoughts about this is I think that it could potentially create a model which could be kind of an example for the rest of Web3. What do we do when one of these projects goes into a death spiral and there's a spectacular failure? Stand back and watch. That's what we do, because we're dealing with a profit-driven capitalist system. We're not. There's no engagement to try and save the other party. Let's just go down the line, because we only have 10 minutes left for closing comments. But exactly, like, What do we see this, or actually, I guess Sonny, since we'll start with you, since this is kind of your baby. Where do we see this ultimately leading? Am I going too big with it? Because I felt like I underappreciated it when I first heard about it. I thought it was cool on a security level, but you're talking about, like, we're talking about the UN, we're talking about Web3, looking out for Web3 on some level. That where do you see this leading?
Yeah. Before that, I want to just mention the like death spiral thing you mentioned. What if one project collapses? One of the common things, like concerns I've always heard about, like people ask about mesh security, is like, oh, imagine you were doing mesh security with Terra when Luna death spiraled. And the thing is, we actually kind of were already. So Osmosis has this thing right now called superfluid staking, which is effectively letting LP shares on Osmosis be used in Osmosis's proof of stake system. And by Osmosis governance choosing which LP shares to use, it is actually effectively almost running a proto version of mesh security, where we are already exposing Osmosis security to other tokens. And the Luna Osmo LP share was used in mesh security. Both Luna Osmo and UST Osmo were both used in Osmosis's mesh superfluid staking, and the system actually like worked perfectly through that whole superfluid process. Like even as Luna and UST crashed to zero, it never got to a point where either of them got to like 33% voting power on Osmosis. So I would say that arguably, like, that proto version of mesh security called superfluid, which is a very Osmosis specific thing, but like it actually did survive one of the most catastrophic failures so far. And so I think that's a good indication that this mechanism is probably more resilient than anyone who was, would have been doing replicated security with Terra or building a smart contract on top of Terra, right? Like that's the beauty of being able to have these app chains that are isolated and be like shielded from failure of any one external party.
And you had mentioned that the Terra network failure was in some ways part of the inspiration for this, not because of Terra network itself, but because of all of the other projects that were on that network, not because of Luna, but because of the other projects on there.
Yeah, a lot of the projects that used to be on Terra have now spun off and are either building their own Cosmos chains or are building smart contracts on Osmosis with the intent to eventually spin off into their own Cosmos chains. And like this is the right model to protect these projects in case of a failure of Osmosis itself, right? Like, or of any one chain. Like, so like, and I think Osmosis was the biggest DEX for UST, but by not being on the Terra chain, it actually allowed Osmosis to continue post Terra collapse in a way that no other Terra, you could borderline argue that Osmosis was somewhat of a Terra project, being the biggest DEX for UST. But by having this like security perimeter, we were able to continue in a way that no other Terra project was able to.
Zaki, I take the same question to you. Are we creating an example here for the rest of the industry that we're hoping they replicate? Well, how big is mesh security and its implications for Web3?
I think as we are, like, all of Web3 is expanding the level of the number of things that they want to have secured through staking, right? Oracles, sequencers, bridges, all of these things. Like and we don't really have any model of permissionlessly running infrastructure other than staking that is battle tested, right? And so mesh staking and restaking more generally are, I think, a critical piece of expanding the scope of, what we can securely do. Because, if the model that won't work is the model of, everyone issues a new shitcoin, everyone users funds are at risk if that shitcoin goes to zero. That model is just it's too unsafe for the user base. And so, one model is, and so the idea of trying to incentivize a rehypothecated stake and infrastructure providers that are reliable to keep stacking yield by running more services and being part of more communities and securing more stuff is probably the best way we can continue to scale Web3 while relying it remaining a permissionless infrastructure environment.
Sergey, taking the same question over to you. Do you think that we're creating a model here that could be, replicated and applied throughout Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at kind of a more broadly what we're going through in Web3, right? There's a trend to go from general purpose to special purpose, right? And I think like any technology stack goes through this, where originally everybody tries to make, how do I make sure everything is as general as possible, right? Like Turing complete and so on and so forth. Why? Because everybody's experimenting, right? Like, and so the cost of building infrastructure, has to be low enough so you can have these experiments on top of it. Now I feel like we're entering the world where things can become a little bit more specialized, right? And when things are specialized, one of the things that goes through, right now is like the concept of trying to decouple sort of security, functionality, and token utility, right? And I think to me, kind of a mesh security is, and interchain security are sort of along the same kind of similar lines, trying to decouple different functions, right, of networks. So you provide in security, you provide in, utility, and you have some type of functionality, and all of them could be either blended together, or they could be kind of a specialized, and you can kind of borrow and lend these functionalities from one chain to another, from one app to another. So yeah, I would say kind of overall in Web3, this is probably the trend that we're going to go through over the next few years, is trying to figure out what are like the building blocks that are special enough, that are important enough that they can be both imported and exported, right? And I guess, security is one of the building blocks or primitive that needs to be kind of exported and imported at the right levels. And so I think, that's why it's very interesting.
What do you think, Valentin? I mean, you're just launching right now. How do you see this playing out into the future of not only Cosmos but Web3 overall?
I think that the first step towards this interconnected future, not just on the economic sense, but also in the user experience sense, was actually IBC. I would argue IBC was a 0 to 1 moment, and things such as interchain security, replicate security are the 1 to 10 maybe moments. And I think that what IBC has proven, being a relatively young protocol, around 2 years, I think at this point, is that while it was merely intended to just allow token transfers up until a couple of weeks ago, with our very good partners at Strangelove, we've essentially kind of rewritten many of the relay infrastructure and more on IBC to allow for us to essentially manage assets across chains. And while that's just one use case, I think the underlying thing we're trying to mention here is that I think the Web3 community and governance of any chain is going to move to a more connected future by understanding that the fate are connected. Whether you have economic shared security like in Mesh or not, you have all these DeFi protocols which essentially oftentimes use obviously other tokens as the underlying of what they do, right? Osmosis is a DEX because other people want to buy and trade other tokens. And XLR is a bridge because people want to move their assets from outside of IBC to IBC. And so I think that I'm a big fan of the bringing together user experience and bringing together protocols such as token swaps. Massive fan of token swaps, massive fan of essentially closer consolidation of what users can expect in DeFi protocols. We have seen in this bear market a lot of need for cutting off dead weight, right? And I think there is a massive opportunity for the next bull market to essentially be a reincarnation of the WAGMI movement, less so that everybody is involved, but more so that the good ones are all in it together. And to share security across those in whatever form projects decide, I think is a very natural next step, as I think the biggest issue we see in crypto, but also in politics overarching, is incentive misalignment, right? If people are in positions of decision-making power where they're not stakeholders of the decisions nor exposed to, the rat tail of bad decision-making, you will continue to have people make decisions for their own sake. Whereas if we in crypto, with our interconnected, community, understand that our values are in fact aligned, and we make sure that on the economic scale they are aligned, I think we're building a very bright future for any DeFi application moving forward, and we are pretty excited for it.
Well, that's fantastic, and thank you so much for coming, guys. Cosmos is a great project. Osmosis is a great project. I would like to have both all of you on our spaces again and do more interviews because this is definitely something we could dive into more. We're going to go ahead and conclude this here after having been able to dive into it just a little bit. But thank you for taking part of it. I really, really appreciate it. Jose, I am also going to I'm going to go ahead and sign off myself. We do have Luke back, and Luke can wrap this up with you.
Justin, it's been a pleasure.
Yes,
it's been a real pleasure. Amazing chat, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you. Peace.
What a chat, guys. Amazing. Hey, Luke, welcome back.
Hello, sir. Thank you.
What an amazing panel. Eh? We discussed most of the hot topics. We started with decentralization and how that impacts the market. Then we continue to security and how to secure the investors' funds. Also, we talk a bit about the hackers that are lately looking to get your money. So it's been a great topic, and then we ended up with this amazing new update that is the mesh security, that I'm so interested in how it works and how it applies to the project that maybe need help from other projects on the same blockchain, and it's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the whole day was great too. I appreciate you and everybody in the chat. Give Jose here a big shout out. He and Justin were the masterminds behind this event and the reason why we do it. Like the little bit of a story I like to tell is Benzinga launched its crypto news desk in 2019. We were beneficiaries from and got to have a blast with the bull run that followed. Now that we're in a little bit more turbulent at a time, we're looking at how we think about this market and how we look at this market. And that's why we're looking a lot more at the technologies behind it. What has staying power? What's transformative? So I appreciate all the energy you and the entire Benzinga team takes into making sure that we're making that promise to our users.
Yes, sir. Let's thanks again to the sponsors, which thanks Bancor, Origin Protocol, Yesports, YieldApp, and StillDex. And thanks for making this possible, guys. This is Crypto Unlocked, powered by Benzinga, and hope to see you guys on Thursday to wrap up this amazing event on the Crypto Open Mic Twitter Space.
And what time on Thursday is that?
At noon. At noon, sir.
At noon on Thursday.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty, I'll be there. Thank you, everyone. The site is benzinga.com. Check it out. You got the chat here. Give us any feedback, speakers you want to hear either in the spaces or up next. Appreciate you hanging with us and appreciate you all being investors.
Bye-bye.